3, 2, 1.
Today is Tuesday, May 16, 2017. It is 1:00 p.m. We are at Mount Everett Regional High School, Sheffield, Massachusetts. We are interviewing Merrill Edward Varney, Jr. Merrill's birthday is July 27, 1941. The people conducting the interview are Megan Smith and myself, Bethany Kirshner. Recording the interview is Paul O'Brien. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
Where were you living at the time?
Fitchburg, Massachusetts.
And why did you join?
That's a very good question, because I think in order to really understand, you have to think about, I grew up as a child during the Second World War. My uncle was in the Marine Corps, my father was in the Marine Corps, my uncles were in the Marine Corps, and as a child growing up, you become, I would say, very enthused, indoctrinated, and you see a tremendous amount of country pride in serving the country. And back in November of 1958, I made a decision to join the Marine Corps I felt I could do something to help the country. I was not college material at the time. I later became college material. After 4 and 5 years, I became college material. And when I joined, I got on the train in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, and ended up in Boston, and was sworn into the Marine Corps, and it goes on from there.
What did you feel when you were being sworn in?
Very proud. Very proud. Yes.
Why did you pick the service branch you joined?
Yeah, I think it goes back to my family background of my uncle was on Iwo Jima when the Marines raised the flag on Marine, remember the flag where the Marines are holding the flag on the top of Mount Suribachi? I'm sure if you go to Washington, D.C., and you see the Marine statue of the flag with the Marines, there's 4 or 5 Marines and 1 corpsman, and they're holding up the Marine flag. That was one of the worst battles of the Pacific during the Second World War. My uncle was on that battlefield. And then my father was in the Marine Corps, so I had a lot of influence from my family to become a Marine.
Do you recall your first days in service?
What was that again now?
Do you recall your first days in service?
Absolutely. Yeah. My first days were going to Parris Island, South Carolina. And you get off of the train and you arrived at Parris Island, and you're with 150 other guys from all over the United States. And the first thing that you find out is that you're nobody. The thing they teach you first of all is you're going to become one unit. And they break you down and they reform your life. You have kids that are coming from Bronx, New York, from Fitchburg, Massachusetts, from Connecticut, from California. Everybody at a different walk of life. Tough guys, smart guys, mean guys, good guys. And you spend a couple months, 6 weeks, I can't even recall. But on Parris Island, you learn discipline. You learn what becoming a Marine is. If they teach you that if you make a mistake, everybody's paying for it. And during that process, now I told you there were 150 of us that got off that train going into Parris Island. And you go into platoons. Of that platoon that I was in, there were like 130 guys that were in it. And there were only like 45 or 50 that graduated on time. They will cull you out emotionally, medically. We call them sick, lame, and lazy. That's Marine Corps talk. That if you can't make it, the only way you're going to get off the island is pass on time, pass the obstacle course, pass the mental and physical training. But the biggest thing is emotional. And it's an emotional thing where this is the first time kids or guys 18 years old have ever been away from home, and they start becoming homesick. I joined in November And I was on Paris Island through Christmas holidays. First time in my life I was away from home. And I was handling it okay. I was committed to it, but there were guys in my squad bay that were crying, calling for their mother. And it gets to be pretty serious. And if they find a weakness in you, they will stay on you until they break you. That's very important, that they want to get rid of you as soon as possible so you don't cause harm. I was fortunate to have veterans from the Korean War that were drill instructors. And they knew what dying was all about. They knew what training was, and they knew how to get through the stuff that they didn't want you being a Marine unless you could make it. And it becomes part of your life forever. So.
Do you remember your instructors?
Sergeant Smiley. He was from South Carolina. One of the meanest people I have ever met in my life. And he hated Yankees. And I just happened to be from Massachusetts. And Sergeant Smiley told me he was going to kill me. He was going to make sure that I did not make it because I wasn't going to represent the United States Marine Corps as a Yankee. And he tried very hard, and it made me stronger.
How did you get through your initial training or boot camp?
I did the very best I could. As I said, the fastest way to get off of Paris Island is to stay with the program. I've seen guys that were a little bit overweight, couldn't make it through the obstacle course. If you can't make it through the obstacle course, you'll start over from basics training from day one until you pass. You go into Fat Man's platoon. They will get rid of the weight. If you can't climb the rope, you're going to train and train and train until you can climb the rope, ring the bell. That's really all I can say. If you're going to be there, if you want to get off that island, you have to stay with the program. Otherwise, you're going to stay on the island until you can do what you have to do to get off the island.
Which war or era did you serve?
Well, give you a little background. When I left Paris Island, I went to Camp Geiger. That's what they call where you learn your training as a Marine. The shooting and everything that you learn is a skill. And after Camp Geiger, you have your first placement or your first tour duty of where you go. Now, something you have to consider or understand in the Marine Corps is if you're in the real Marine Corps, the regular Marine Corps, you always are going to spend 2 years of every 4 years with the fleet. The Marine Corps is a division of the Navy. And we are the fighting part of the Navy. Well, I don't want to say the fighting part of the Navy. The Navy fights too, but not the way we do. And so my first assignment out of Camp Geiger was to Marine Barracks, Norfolk, Virginia, and where they give you different assignments based on what your MOS is. MOS is what your job description is. I was more administrative. From there, I was selected to go to top secret duty at Armed Forces Staff College, not a college for me. It's an Armed Forces Staff College for colonels and above, colonels, generals, admirals, and we are the security. If you remember, even this week, you look at the White House, and you see Trump coming out the door, and you see the Marine standing by the doorway. Well, that's what I did for 2 years, top secret duty. That you made sure they were taken care of, no matter what. All of the important people you take care of. And there are a lot of different ways. When they get off the helicopter, when President Trump gets off the helicopter, you see that Marine saluting him, and he salutes him back. It's just out of respect, but you're always there watching over people more important than you are. And you're ready to take care of that for them. After you serve your 2 years on duty, and I did that for 2 years, consistently, and you form bonds and ties with the guys you're working with because it's very stressful duty. And you have an opportunity to have an input of where do you want to go next. And this friend of mine, Jim Hansford, and I became very good friends. In fact, we are friends today. We talk to each other on Facebook. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But anyway, we became very good friends, and we went down to the office at the Marine Barracks, and they said, okay, it's your time to leave now. Where do you want to go for your real duty? You know, because we had this pretty nice duty, clean duty. And we had to go and spend our 2 years at the fleet, with traveling around the world. And we chose to go to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And so when we were transferred to Camp Lejeune, I was in Company B and he was in Company A, and we stayed friends all through our Marine Corps life. And then in 1962, we were put on red alert. Now, red alert in the Marine Corps means that you can go and be deployed any place in the world within 24 hours. And you go on total lockdown. You cannot communicate with anybody that you're leaving, where you're going, or whatever. At the time, I was dating my current wife, Karen, and I was supposed to meet her on a Friday, this coming Friday. And I was deployed and didn't know where I was going. And I couldn't get back to her for almost a month because I couldn't tell anybody where I was. And so you get used to that kind of a life, that you're gone for quite a while. But then you come back after that deployment. It could have been Lebanon. It could have been a lot of different places that you go that you really can't even talk about. And I spent 6 months on a med cruise. And the med cruise is you leave Norfolk, Virginia, with your company and your battalion, and you leave for 6 months traveling every port in the Mediterranean. And it's the Sixth Fleet with the Navy. I was on the USS Monrovia. And you travel all over the Mediterranean, and you work with other countries, Italians, Spanish, the French, and combat different things. You'll make a deployment off of a ship like they used to do in the Second World War. You climb down the ropes, get on a landing craft, you make a landing on the beach. And you set up a perimeter, and you take a hill. You do you're practicing all war all the time. Sometimes you're competing against your own people. You'll have SEALs that'll come in and try to get through your lines and capture your captain and put him in jail, slap him around a little bit, and make you very embarrassed that he got caught. And so you really, it's a war game that is not a game really. It's really, you're really getting ready for the real stuff. And I was scheduled to get out of the Marine Corps in 1962. And all of a sudden, President Kennedy and President Khrushchev got into an argument about Cuban missiles. That the United States had put missiles in Turkey that were pretty close to the Russian border. And Khrushchev became very upset about it and wanted us to get rid of them. So he sent these missiles to Cuba, who was an ally or communist country, and put these missiles headed toward the United States. And so we go on red alert again, and all of a sudden I'm gone again. And they flew us out to Florida, and we boarded the USS Francis Marion, another naval ship, and we from there we boarded the USS Boxer. Now the USS Boxer is a Marine Corps ship run by the Navy. The Boxer is an aircraft carrier, an old aircraft carrier that doesn't carry airplanes. It carries helicopters. And back in 1962, 1963, helicopters were a way of, instead of hitting the beach with a landing craft, you did what they call vertical envelopment, where you'd take off from the aircraft carrier in a helicopter with a group of men in the belly of the helicopter. And you'd go in and land behind the lines of the enemy. So you would vertically envelop them where somebody else was coming in from the beach, and you surround them. And my job, being in the administrative end of it, was making sure that everybody had current terrain maps, live ammunition, bayonets, everything to do the killing that you needed to do. And it got to be pretty stressful. We went into Guantanamo Bay and had to get all of the civilians out of the country. Cuba is a long country, and way at the end of it is the United States domain. It's similar to having a country inside of a country. The Cubans can't go there, they can't get inside. It's fenced off, and it's protected by the United States. The United States would virtually go to war if you tried to go through that fence if it was another country. And we had a lot of American people stationed there. And we took them off and put them inside the USS Boxer and took them away. Then we downloaded them and set the perimeter up. We set up a blockade. And Khrushchev was coming across the Atlantic Ocean with more bombs and things to give to Cuba. I'm thinking missiles, whatever. And we were told by President Kennedy to make absolutely sure that he did not break that barrier that we had set up. So you pretty well know you're either going to live or die at that time. I mean, it gets to be very, very serious. And you start thinking about in your mind, well, why am I doing this if I know I'm in such a lot of trouble? And you chose to do this. And you start thinking about, well, why am I doing this? And then you start thinking, well, my mom and dad back home, and it gets to be very personal. So you grow up, and I was able to get out okay, and went to college on the GI Bill, bought my first house with the VA loan. I'll never forget those times. I was thinking, why did I ever do this? And I was thinking, even today, we went to going to Denver, and I was listening to the airline, and they were saying, do we have any veterans on board? You get special boarding for the plane. And I'm thinking, well, is she talking about a retired veteran or just a veteran? And it was amazing. I went up after everybody loaded up, and we were going to be going next, and I said, did I hear you say that veterans would have priority boarding? And she says, yes, sir. And I said, well, I have my card right here that shows my discharge and everything. And she says, oh, no, you don't have to show that, but thank you very much for your service. So it's been lately now that I can go to Lowe's and get 10% off of all of the things that I buy. But I could go on, but I don't want to just dwell on that.
What was it like arriving?
Where?
Anywhere.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I said in the beginning, when you first land in Paris Island, it's pretty much a different world. When you graduate from there, you're another person. I'll never forget, I told you Sergeant Smiley hated me to death, but when I became an NCO, I was at the NCO club in Camp Lejeune years later, after we'd gone on the med cruise and been on all of these other things, and I was in the NCO club, and I look up and I see Sergeant Smiley up at the bar, and I said, oh God, I'm sure he still hates me. And I go up and I introduce, I says, my name is Corporal Varney, and I wanted to introduce myself, but I said, you had one of the most unbelievable effects on my life, that you really, really made me a man. And he just stood there and had a grin on his face. And he says, well, I'm glad you made it. And it was like I can't tell you the pride that I had in telling him, like a father, well, this is the influence you had on my life. And it was very impressive, very impressive. But that's what it's like,
So did you see combat? You said that you oversaw.
We, as close, let's say I didn't kill anybody, but we did some stuff that kept people from getting killed. The Marines are more of a show of force than they are, no, but they'll do what they have to do. But usually when they see you coming, they'll back off. It's very few that'll stick around because we have tremendous firepower. I mean, I'll never forget, we were on a training mission down in Vieques, right off the coast of San Juan, Puerto Rico, which is an island that is owned by the United States government. And this was another practice range, and it has nothing about combat, but it's how you prepare for combat. And we would have F-4 Phantoms coming off of a Navy flyer coming down and bombing and strafing live ammunition, and we would set up a big perimeter. And so we're a company on a hill, and we're overlooking it. And down in the valley, if there's anything live, you want to shoot it and kill it. It doesn't make any difference what it is. We're not killing real people right now. But unfortunately, the natives of Vieques, from the little town of Isabela Segunda, had cows that would walk around the beach. And 2 of those cows walked in our fire line, and we just shot them. I mean, we killed them good. We had every gun in the whole division shooting at these 2 cows. Well, it came about that we had to buy those cows because we killed them from the natives, and it cost us like about $100 a piece to buy those cows and keep those people satisfied that we should have not shot those cows. But it was so much fun. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but it was a lot of fun. But, okay, go ahead.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
You have, in my particular situation, you would have casualties that were not related to war all the time. When we would make a landing, if you have 400 guys making a beach landing, you're going to have 10, 15, or 20 of them, they're going to get hurt some way. Either falling off the rope ladder and hitting themselves, looking up when a guy drops his gun and it breaks his nose, fights, everything that normally happens, but a little bit more condensed with these guys. They make a lot of their own problems, but it's fun. You get used to it.
How do like the medical people go around without getting hurt?
Well, that's these guys are like angels. They are probably more respected than your best friend. Medics are all Navy people, and they're just phenomenal people. They'll go into battle and help you and drag you out, and I can't say enough for them. They're with you all the time. They're like your doctor, but he's right there with you fighting. He doesn't have a gun. He might have a pistol or something, but his main thing is to get you out of the site of battle and help you recover and get you patched up.
Tell me a couple of your most memorable experiences.
I think the Cuban crisis with Khrushchev and Kennedy were probably the most... I think the big thing was that Kennedy was from Massachusetts, first of all. The Kennedys, I'm from Fitchburg, well, Concord, Lexington. Rose Kennedy was from Concord, his mother. The Kennedy compound in Hyannis. I mean, the Kennedys have made a tremendous contribution to Massachusetts. Joe Kennedy, for instance, in Boston, has a great big billboard even today. And it's Joe, if you need fuel if you need fuel for winter, call Joe. I mean, call Joe Kennedy, and some of his people, and I've even seen him out there pumping fuel in some person that couldn't afford to buy fuel oil. So the Kennedys have had a tremendous influence in Massachusetts. Not that I'm a Democrat or was a Democrat. I am now. But, whether Catholic or Protestant, back then religion was quite a thing. And to be a Catholic in Massachusetts was not the greatest thing to be, because you're coming into a state that was primarily very Protestant, very Puritan. And the Irish Catholic were really looked down upon. And I grew up with Catholic kids my whole life, best friends I ever had. When I went into the Marine Corps, I had never seen a black person. 18 years old, and had never seen a real live black person. And you go there and you talk about some guys that were just phenomenal, some tremendous leaders. These guys had tremendous stamina, very smart, tough, but you get everybody's walk of life. Everybody's the same when you're in the military, and I think that's a big influence on your life. I don't think I've ever had a bad bone in my body about having any type of discrimination about anybody. And I think knowing how people are when you look at them on an individual basis is a tremendous benefit. I sometimes wish that every kid could go into the military for a short amount of time to just experience how it is to grow up and see how wonderful people can be. Now, you have your bad ones too. I mean, everybody has bad people. But the majority of these guys are really great, great guys that you would die for. I mean, physically, you would. So.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yeah, I had a good conduct medal. You have to be in the service for 2 years without getting in trouble. Now, that was pretty easy for me because I didn't really get too much trouble. I was kept too busy. But no, I didn't have any other... I never received any other major medals, no.
Was the good conduct medal like a problem for anybody? Like, was it difficult for people to get that?
Yeah, matter of fact, what's so funny is when you get somebody coming into the Marine Corps, they're not normally an average guy. They've got something to prove. And whether they can be taken care of and straightened out before they get too far out of line, because the Marine Corps will do that for you. It'll straighten you out if you have an attitude. But if you get in trouble and it goes onto your record, you're definitely not going to get a good conduct medal.
I see that you brought some papers with you. Can you tell us about them?
Sure. One I thought was really good is this is a term paper that one of my grandsons did. And I made this copy for you guys if you wanted to read it over and everything. But I'm going to just kind of highlight it. It's talking about in detail. I think he was a freshman in high school when he wrote this. And he talks about the Cuban crisis. He interviewed me about what was it like to be involved with the Cuban crisis, because younger folks don't realize how important that really was. Because look at the heading where it says, "The war that almost was." Well, if that war was, that means this would have been a nuclear war in the United States, on the United States by Russia. And it shows what we did to circumvent that from happening. And it's really summarizing what I have just told you about the blockade we put in to stop the Russians from coming through the blockade in detail. So it's really nice and it's very interesting. This is my DD 214, which tells you when I joined, when I was discharged. I had to spend an extra year in the Marine Corps because I was extended by President Kennedy. And I was supposed to get out in September of 1962 to start college. And I had to wait until 1963 to get an extension after the Cuban crisis was over with. And then they gave me a discharge. But this documents everything. This here is when I became a private first class enlisted. This tells when I became a lance corporal, and then this tells you what my discharge rank was a Corporal E4. This is talking about my uncle who served on Iwo Jima, and that was a pass where he could go on liberty, and it had to be signed, and his name was Richard Varney. This was the Veterans Administration telling me that I was approved for a VA loan to buy my first house, and I could go on and on. Keep in mind, it went quite a few years, and I also have made a diary of this was This was in Rome in 1962. This guy drew my face. I thought I was much better looking than that. But and this is a diary that I did for the whole 6 months of all the different countries I went to, the different ports, Barcelona, Corsica. I could go on. Portugal. It was probably the greatest time of my life. And for the last 15 years, my wife and I have been going back to all these places. We were in Barcelona, Rome, Athens, Greece, Crete, Sardinia, Corsica. I could go on and on. Lebanon, Beirut. It was just phenomenal. When you've been there and you hear about them as you grow older, and then all of a sudden everything becomes so clear how close we are to everybody, how intermingled all of our countries are. And I think that's something, especially with geography in the younger kids now, I hear that you're not as proficient in geography as we were. I mean, I used to be able to name the 52 countries in South Africa, or Africa, 52 countries. And I was thinking about, gee, I wonder how many kids could do in Africa now. I mean, it's amazing. Geography is so important. And you think that you're so different, and you're not. I just got back from 2 weeks in France, southern France. We go back every year for the last 15 years. And you see how different people live and how close, and everybody has a family, everybody has good times, bad times, but everybody is basically nice people. I mean, the majority of them are all really nice people. You can't go to Paris and not have somebody say, can I help you? Or if they see you reading something and you're lost and you're trying to find out how the subway works or whatever, you'll always find somebody. We were walking with our bags. It's just getting harder and harder to walk up and down these railroad steps at a railroad station. And we were at this little railroad station in Avignon, and there was a lot of steps going up. And my wife was trying to carry her bag, and I'm carrying mine. And these two young boys, little French boys, were walking up the stairs beside us, little high school kids, and they grabbed our bags. My wife thought they were stealing it. She wouldn't let them go. But anyway, he insisted to help her take the bag up, and then the other one came and got mine. And then they left and didn't ask for any money, just said thank you. And yeah, that's what you get to realize when you're dealing with the world as far as it is. And you also learn that there are people that want to hurt you too. I mean, when you talk about bad countries, and you always have to be prepared for that. That's why you do what you do. Yeah.
Were there a lot of enlisted people that were bilingual?
The majority, first of all, when you have, when I call it MOS, when you have a specialty that you're very good in, you are going to be separated into a group of people which would most likely be people that are involved with top security situations. You'll be put into an area where you are going to be used for what you are best at. And so if you have anybody that's bilingual, that is such a tremendous plus in your life. Because it means, first of all, you're not going to be doing what I did. You're going to be probably sitting someplace in the Pentagon in D.C. or whatever, or being used in the field as a transcriber or a translator. And you're going to be in a much better opportunity to advance faster in your pay grade. So it's a tremendous advantage. My granddaughter just is now working, she's very bilingual with French, which gave us the instinct to try to become more involved with French. And she has a tremendous job now, and it's really because of her bilingual situation. She spent a year at Po College in Paris as her senior year abroad. And we visited her while she was there. But I mean, it was being bilingual that gave her the edge to get an education like that and get a tremendous job. So it's very important.
What was the food like?
Fantastic. Keep in mind, you're with the Navy, okay? Mm-hmm. The Navy eats, they are the best. They will feed you. They have the best food. Now, it's probably we appreciate it more because When you're living on a beach for 4 or 5 weeks or a week or whatever on the side of a mountain, and you're eating sea rations that were packaged for the Korean War, and you'll cherish fresh sliced peaches, and if you drop the peach in the sand, you reach down and you pick it up, and you clean it off, and you eat it. And then you say, I cannot wait to get back on that ship and start eating that Navy food, because it is without a doubt the best food, the best cooks, and we love them very much. Yes, it's very good.
So did you ever run out of supplies? Were you ever short?
Well, matter of fact, no, because I was the supply NCO. I made sure that everybody in our platoon had everything that they needed to survive. When they were going to make a landing, I made sure they had the ammunition, the food, water, everything that they needed to go for a week or 2 weeks. I made sure they had everything. So I always had what I needed.
Was there anything special you did for good luck?
Matter of fact, yes, there was. While I was on the med cruise, my wife, then my girlfriend, Karen, would write me all the time. And a lot of times you'd see the helicopter coming in. See, you don't have a mailman that just comes by and drops stuff in your mailbox. You wait for a helicopter. Could be a week, could be 2 weeks, but when the helicopter comes, he'll have 4, 5, 6 letters coming from the United States. And he'd land on the fantail of the ship, and we'd get the mail bags, and I'd get 4 or 5 letters, and I'd stick them in my pocket, and every once in a while I'd take one out and read it. And yeah, it was like good luck. Yeah, it was always, she always kept in touch. Now, I'd give you an example of how important that was. I got out in September of '63. We got married in 1965, April 13th, 1965. We've been married 54 years. I have 9 grandchildren, 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and almost all of them older than you, my grandchildren. Isn't that something? Okay.
Did you ever,
Yep, go ahead.
did you ever learn Morse code?
You know, I was in the Boy Scouts. Now, you know, isn't that something? I'm always involved with all of these structured things, but in order to become an Eagle Scout, you had to learn the Morse code. I never became an Eagle Scout. I could only be a regular Boy Scout. I always wanted to be an Eagle Scout, but I could not learn the Morse code. I can't learn French very well either. So, I mean, now my wife is very good at that.
Mm-hmm. How did people entertain themselves?
Oh, when we were on ship, we had boxers, what we call anybody that wanted to fight. We set up a ring on the deck of the ship, because you know you're on a ship for 6 months and it gets very boring. Mm-hmm. And you do calisthenics all the time. You're doing calisthenics, but the biggest thing is when you'd have Navy and Marines fighting each other in a boxing ring. And it was just unbelievable. I mean, you just loved it, you know what I mean? Because when you get to that point, we really don't like the Navy that much, you know what I mean? We liked them, but not that much, okay? Okay. Now, I'm kind of joking because we really do like them, but it was fun.
Were there any pranks you recall pulling or that others pulled on you?
When you talk about pranks, there's not too many pranks that you really want to get caught doing. Mm-hmm. One I can tell you, and you have to just be, I'm going to try to clean it up a little bit, but you know, you guys would go out on liberty. You'd always have somebody that drank too much, okay? And it was inevitable that we took care of each other. I mean, you wouldn't let a guy get too bad, but a lot of guys get a little bit too bad, and they come in, and when they come into the squad bay, they make a lot of noise, go around waking everybody up. And then they go and they pass out. And one way that we took care of this one guy is we picked up him and his bed and brought him out and put him out in the middle of our marching field. And he stayed there all night long. Well, at 5 o'clock in the morning, the Marine band comes down the parade field playing the Marine Corps hymn. And he's laying in his cot in the middle of the parade field. And now, everybody wants to know how he got there. See, nobody ever found out how he got there. And nobody will ever know unless you say something. Okay? All right.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yes. Yes, I do. It's very sad.
What's sad about it?
I think it's the same thing as when you graduate from college and you've been in this little cocoon for 4 or 5 years. It's not necessarily a cocoon, but you are going to be leaving guys that you've been with. And you're going into the unknown. I don't know why I get like this. It's sad, but in order to move forward, you have to keep going. You know what I mean? You can't, and especially when you've been in there enough and you're still alive, and they want you to re-enlist, but they know if Vietnam's coming up. That was terrible. Everybody knew that was terrible. And fortunately, we got out just before Vietnam, because when that happened, that was the most terrible, terrible thing. So many people died unnecessarily. So, yeah, it's very sad. You get very attached to the guys you're with. But,
Where were you when your service ended?
I was in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, is when I got my discharge papers. And I was starting at East Carolina College, right 40 miles north of New Bern, North Carolina. My wife, my girlfriend at that time, was living in New Bern, North Carolina. And so we could see each other all the time. But and then we got married in 1965. So.
What did you do in the days and weeks afterward?
After I got out of school, I went to Raleigh, North Carolina, and got on a sales training program, which was pretty good because it gave me the opportunity to earn money, get promotions, all I can say is that all of a sudden you're not thrown into. You're in an environment now, you're with civilians who had never been in the military. You have a tremendous advantage as far as responsibility, knowing what you have to do to get the job done. Nobody has to tell you what time you have to be at work. You know what time you're supposed to be there. You come early. And you do the very best job you can. I think it teaches, you have such an edge on a regular guy that's never been in the service. It's, I wouldn't say you know the advantages, you just know the disadvantages they have because they don't have the discipline. And, you always know you have I say you always know, but I always knew that I could do anything. I mean, I don't want to say that, but I mean, you have an edge on your competitor because of what you've been through. And that's a good feeling. It's like the difference between having a college education and a high school education. Because high school, you're just starting. But then you go to the next level, and you say, whoa, I didn't realize that. You start listening to people. So.
You said earlier that you are still friends with that one friend. Do you want to
Jim Hansford. Matter of fact, he sent me a text with a picture. He's just had a valve replaced in his heart, and I've been finding out how he's doing and everything. And he and his wife are leaving on a med cruise, personal med cruise, that they're going to go trying to find out all the little places that we went to when we were in the Marine Corps. But Jim's he's a great guy. I mean, we've stayed in touch for all these years. It's like he's closer than a brother. A lot of guys have brothers they don't like. And, I don't know that, but I mean, I'm sure there are. But no, we're very, very close still. He's come to visit me. I've gone down to visit him in Georgia, and it's been good. It's been a great relationship.
Did you join a veterans organization?
No. No, I've been asked to join the Veterans of Foreign Wars or the VFW or a lot of different things. it seems like when I left, I left. There's so much more that happened in my life since then. I mean, I'm 75. I mean, you know, I was out of the Marine Corps when I was 25. So I've been very blessed with what I've accomplished in my life, and I'm very proud of what I've done, and had a great wife, great marriage, and great children, great grandchildren. Costing me a lot of money, but I mean, it's okay.
How did your experiences change the way you think about war, or how did it change the way you thought about the military before going in?
Well, you absolutely need, every country needs a military, and as far as war, nobody likes war. It's horrible. But it's almost like putting up with a bully. As long as you let him push you around, you're going to be pushed around. And the only way you stop it is go up and just smack him one, tell him to mind his own business. We have to always be strong, always. You're going to need a military. That's the way the world is. But, you know, I see what's happening with Russia and now, and it's the way they're taking advantage of us. It's very sad. But you've got some of the best military people in the right places right now. I mean, it's phenomenal. They're thank God they're there, because if it wasn't for them, I would really be worried. But we've got some very good ex-military generals and admirals that are in the right place. So,
do you attend reunions?
well, it's no. Again, in order for me to have a reunion, which I do belong to the 2nd Marine Division thing, whatever it is, alumni or whatever. I send them money, but in order to attend the reunion, I would have to physically leave and go back to Camp Lejeune for this reunion. And that's every year. And you meet with all of the new guys and all the generals, where I've really gone so far past that. You know, I respect them. I love hearing about it, but my life is so different now. You know, it's just totally different.
What advice would you have for a young person who is considering entering the military?
I would say get your education first. If you ever wanted to feel or know what a pecking order is in the Marines or any military, if you're not a commissioned officer, you're at the wrong end of the sword. I mean, it's you have so many much better training and everything, lifestyle. But when you're an enlisted person in the service, it's very tough. It's not easy. And so I would say definitely get your education, become a commissioned officer. You can do that through going through OCS and graduate as a 2nd lieutenant, or there are a lot of ways you can do it. But definitely go in as an officer. Get your education first.
What are your viewpoints on how women are becoming more involved?
You know, that's a really good question, especially in the Marine Corps. At one point, they didn't want any women at all, but women are such a support system as far as administrative, and they're very sharp. I mean, women have a better intellect in a lot of ways than a man does. We think different. Women are a lot more compassionate, I think, and a little bit more understanding. Men are not that. I can't think of the words. Men aren't that way. Okay, and I think they add so much goodness, warmth to what they do to really bring it all together as far as in the administrative end. I don't think it's good for them to be on the lines or anything like that, because I wouldn't want to see a woman get hurt like that or get captured or anything, because it's just brutal. But no, I think it's a backup situation you couldn't find. I'd rather have a woman in her situation giving me directions as far as a drone strike or something like that than being on the battlefield with me, or having a guy do it. Because a guy is a mental guy. They don't think like a woman.
Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered yet in this interview?
I don't know. I don't know how long we've been going, but this has been a joy. It really has. I never realized how involved you get. Thank you.
It's been an honor interviewing you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.